Hi. This bit of molded cardboard is currently serving as my spare mech bin, and it is a bin where all of my unpainted Battletech mechs without packaging live. Some, like this TDR-5S Thunderbolt from the Game of Armored Combat box, have already been painted in a test scheme and stripped away for eventual repurposing. Others, such as this Atlas AS7 from the Inner Sphere Direct Fire Lance box, are completely untouched. I see content creators who are less honest with either themselves or their audience refer to their collections such as this as piles of potential.
Yeah, see that makes it look a little bit small.
Oh, now you fucked up. Now you fucked up. Now you fucked up. You have fucked up now!
In a way which I find obnoxiously optimistic and waxing in frivolous poetics. The truth is, many of these mechs will likely never be painted, but today, one of them will be. The specific one evades me so far, as I am looking for one very specific feature, one which this Marauder doesn't quite have. And oddly, while you think it would, this LGB7Q longbow is only slightly better. Only then do I see this. And the STK-3F Stalker Heavy Fire Support Assault Mech. Coming in at 85 tons, it's got enough armor to survive a heavy beating, and luckily, it's modeled like it, with big, wide, flat armor plates on the side of its LRM-10 missile pods, which I am looking for the likes of. And so, this mech, which has sat idly for probably 2 years on a box under my bed, is getting a lot of attention today. I get my hobbying toolkit roll and extract the necessary supplies for our operations in this video, and explicably, this is why I have chosen a mech with broad and spacious flat geometry. Some 6mm scale water slide decals on these transfer sheets that are no larger than a business card, some simple black and white unit numbers, and then a symbol for an in-universe Battletech unit, followed by the crest of one of the great houses of the Inner Sphere. These three components necessary to completing most unit liveries, the heraldry matches that of the Capellan Confederation Armed Forces Death Commandos, one of the single most feared and iconic units from the literature, fanatically loyal to the ruling lineage of House Liao, and firmly in possession of the single drippiest unit patch I have ever seen in my entire life. To the extent that there is no real lore-based reason that I have selected this particular sub-faction as my subject of today's video, only because their logo and color scheme looked so damn cool that I found the transfers on eBay and just knew immediately that I had to paint this. And it was rather hard finding such items if I am being honest. Good transfers for hobby modeling are difficult to produce. If you want bright transfers which translate easily on dark schemes like the one we shall be doing today, you need either a printer which can print white ink as backing for your designs
They'll print anything these days.
on transparent film, or else a Cricut cutter model which can cut them out to shape from solid white transfer paper. These are both expensive equipment-wise processes and often error-rich, and as a result, this aspect combined with the rather still niche element of the Battletech aftermarket component scene means that I had to go to Defiance Industries, a European-based company which vends anything from mech-scaled Aerodyne dropships down to tiny transfers like these just for you and your mech wargaming needs. This video is not sponsored by Defiance Industries, in case you were wondering whether anyone went to the trouble of sponsoring a 2K sub channel. Okay, moving on. Particularly the single widest range of decals for this or any wargame I have ever seen. They gave me a list in the packaging of all the stuff they do, and it's literally any Battletech unit you can think of, from the Lyran Heavy Guard all the way down to something as obscure as the Minnesota Tribe. Which only the most educated Battletech fans and one very deranged coordinator of worlds even knows what the Minnesota Tribe is, so like props to you basically. All of this variety, however, comes with a huge caveat. The shipping was expensive as hell, on top of the hobby tax for specialty items like 6mm transfers which have only sold a single-digit quantity on their eBay page. On top of waiting a long-ass time for your shit to arrive from the land of aggressive colonization and generational global Civil War. But was the wait worth it for these allegedly premium water slide transfers? Will they bring something to the table which will markedly improve my hobby painting game? And why do I bother asking questions like this when I'm literally about to fucking show you? Let's just get into this shit. The purchasing process, if you are wondering, is fairly simple. They have a couple stores, one that ships out of the United Kingdom and one out of France. You go to whichever one has better pricing after shipping and put whatever you want in your cart. The stores are organized differently, but mine worked in a way where you select a generic category like Capellan military units, and then in drop-down box picks the exact one you want. This eBay store was not set up to enable combined shipping, which is where if you buy multiple different products from the same page, you only have to pay for one instance of shipping because they are coming together. Instead, by default, they charge you for 3 shipping fees, even though at the end of the day, they will still package them all together. This forces me to use a feature called Request Combined Shipping, which basically messages the seller on your behalf before checkout, which I then had to wait over a day to get a response so they would allow it for my cart. I then paid roughly 45 GBP, whatever the fuck that is, which at the time came out to be 60 US dollars. Meaning each of the sheets you were looking at comes out to be over $20 each. For reference, if you find the right game store, you might be able to buy either the Battletech starter box or a force pack of 4 actual mechs for that much. And my ass bought stickers instead. This means that I am, for this video, invoking my right to be as brutal in criticism of this product as possible on the grounds of expensive bullshit, because at the end of the day, most people don't even make $20 an hour of hard work, and to ask that much for transfers after making a paying customer message you just to not get triple charged for overseas shipping is fundamentally absurd. This also means that I'm keeping this product firmly in its waterproof plastic sleeve because holy shit, damaging this would be catastrophic. So let's get into this demo. Okay, so obviously this video is about the transfers and less the scheme, but I would be a dick for not letting you know how to make your models look this way. I consider a video about water slide decals on 6mm scale wargaming miniatures a very advanced tutorial, and for that reason do not feel overly compelled to explain what cleaning up a miniature looks like to you, as odds say you already know. I will note that I aggressively sanded the parts where I plan on adding decals to promote better adhesion for both the paint and the logos going over them. The Stalker is a relatively very large mech with lots of big surfaces. Even with transfers as tiny as these, you would certainly struggle fitting some of them on scout mechs. The larger end of these sheets could only ever work on buildings or dropships, if then. I also wash my figure thoroughly, as I'm not risking any sort of oils from a mold release formula causing any adhesion issues whatsoever. Skittles. I start with a basing paste. This is Vallejo's Earth Texture Desert Sand and Acrylic Grime, which you can utilize something like this silicone brush here to sort of scoop and then apply much the way a bricklayer might apply the brick paste shit which you use to lay bricks, and I don't know why I use an analogy that involves something I've never fucking done in my life. Where I get sloppy, I make sure to clean off that with a metal dental probe before utilizing some original super glue, a rather runny solution which flows into little puddles over the base, and then with a quick dump in this bag of rocks, we get a nice variety of rock sizes for my base for my model. We're pulling the Vallejos back out for this video. There's probably nobody doing any one color better than Vallejo does blacks. I plan on utilizing these 3, black, basalt gray, and medium sea gray, as the foundation for the main color of the Death Commandos livery, that being black battle mechs with green accents. Vallejo model color black is utilized as the deepest color and therefore the base. Through an airbrush as a base coat, it happens to be the most durable paint I've ever come across. Chemically stripping miniatures with something like Simple Green or LA's Totally Awesome usually leaves much of the black behind caked into the plastic. You just can't get rid of it. This rich inky blackness does take some time to dry, and it'll stay glossy for a good amount of time, but when it starts to dry, it'll begin to look like this. And comparing it to the black on the bottle, I think I can get it a little bit darker, so I give it yet another round of black coat. This is what it looks like finally. But I don't want a pure black miniature, as that's just a great way to just eat your detail and definition. So following up, I'm going to do a zenithal with model color basalt gray. Problematically, you can see just how much this one separates sort of at the top here. A lot of Vallejos have this problem. You just have to make like an adolescent handed any small animal and shake the ass out of it. After prepping in the cup with a little spritz, you can see that even as only marginally brighter paint, it really brings out a lot of the depth in this model, giving it a sort of burnt, if a little bright charcoal look, which is what I am trying for. And I'm just going to come straight in with this Army Painter War Paint Fanatic Dark Tone Wash mixed with just 1 drop of water and giving a liberal application with a brush to darken it back down to a blacker hue. The idea is now it's much easier to see the recesses and edges than if I just left it black, which is the trouble a lot of people have with black models. After a short drying time lapse, this nice layered sort of gradient is where we're at, only to be covered with a protective clear coat of Vallejo gloss varnish from an airbrush. This is both to make our work so far more durable as a base layer for our model, but more importantly than that, to prevent the black wash from reacting with our next product, also a clear coat, being AK Interactive's AK183 Ultra Matte Varnish, which I have found has a tendency to frost up on contact with some dark washes for no reason I can identify, as I am not a chemist. What this is going to do is bring our miniature to absolute flat with no reflectivity to make it easiest to identify the exact tones on our model without light reflection or refraction obscuring it to the naked eye, and particularly to my more sensitive camera for your viewing convenience. Coming back with the basalt gray and my reliable makeup applicator brush, I'm going to give it a pretty good go over with the dry brushed edge highlight to capture all of those lines all over the model to ensure that they are with a lighter gray, like these weapons pods on the arm here. You can really see that it gives the lining a really greater visibility. Finally, we're going to do only a very small amount with that final model color, medium sea gray, which did not mix well at all. I had to fix that. Just the smallest amount of it, this time towards the uppermost surfaces to define that imaginary light source above the model and give it a very clear outline from the angle, which most people will be looking at it from the tabletop, that being from above. It almost looks like this sort of stonewash texture, which will be used as our base for the transfers. Speaking of decals, the Capellan Death Commandos have a pretty basic color scheme, all things considered. You do black and then you paint green on a couple details that you want. Some people go for the garish greens that you might see on a safety vest. I opted instead to get a more camouflaged, adjacent, toned down green for both pragmatism and I like it better. Roughly matching this Vallejo model colored dark yellow, and then planning to use this German yellow as a highlight and match. I think it did. The issue was that if you look at a larger image of the icon on a computer, it's got a much richer green to it than what's in this yellow. I would chalk this down to either a monitor displaying color values differently enough that it is noticeable, or else maybe the printer was running out of an ink cartridge on this, just not achieving the correct green on the design. And while dark yellow does have green, which you can see here, unmixed, it gets trapped in the top of the bottle. A result, I think, when applying this with my brush is that in spite of really good coverage of a pseudo yellow over basically sheer black, by the way, it wasn't quite green enough to just not look like a fucking helldiver. And I tried so hard to unsee it, but it just lived rent-free in my head. And there were bits that I covered on the mech that I realized didn't look very good, and I had to go back with gray to cover them up. And then I tried to make it greener with this green wash, but at the end of the day, I just had one really big problem.
I don't like it very much.
And I could have easily glossed over this whole bit in the script and used editing magic to underplay how much time I wasted here, but the point I aim to make is that these transfers are expensive to the point where I can't accept that this model turns out as anything but the very best product that I'm capable of. I'm getting flashbacks to painting my GW products where the high price tag is really weighing on me over the process, and I just feel compelled that this must be perfect, otherwise I wasted my money. The beauty of Battletech is that it is relatively inexpensive, and your starter army can cost literally $25 as far as models go. Fucking up a paint scheme isn't the end of the world in that case, but for these expensive ass transfers, I find myself giving pause before even applying them, second guessing if this is the final scheme I want to arrive at, or if I'm just going to end up painting over it with decals on it. And here I make a very difficult decision to just redo all the green accents now with this Vallejo model color bright green. I know that it's called bright green, I just got done dogging on the more vibrant iterations I see people doing with the scheme, but here's the thing, I just chose the one which looked right off the rack without checking the name, so this is the one that just looked correct to me, and I have to go to the game store during the painting process to make this work. That sucked. And its coverage is pretty great too. Let's be real, it gets the perfect pastel green on the first coat every time here. I like the little corner brackets and vent covers on the top here. Specifically, it looks like markings on maybe a snake or a venomous lizard if you kind of stripe them like that. This model is intended to be black with green, not black and green, so it's just the little accented bits. I had to crack out my Mega Sniper Needle detail brush just to get the green inside its missile pods here without getting the missiles on top, and then I utilized this old Army Painter Quick Shade green tone to just sort of green up what we have already by just coating the green bits I have now, said green 4 times in the sentence. Following up, I am using this bottle of Vallejo Model Metallic Air Silver RLM01 as I do for any model that I am putting 100% effort into it, as it is by a country mile the best metallic I have ever used. With a detail brush, whether it's the large laser barrels in the torso, the sensor array, more laser barrels in the arms, heat vents in the back to accommodate the blistering amount of firepower this mech is sporting, this paint is perfect and covers perfect every time. I especially like this beautiful paneling around the hatch here, and it's just a masterwork in tiling and armoring a model. After getting all the greeblies I come back with Army Painter's dark tone to coat all those metallics to give them that dull, oily finish I like to see on heavy machinery. The product now looks something like this, and 15 minutes into the video, it is now the time where I feel ready to do some tomfoolery with the product I came here to review. I start by giving the whole model another coat of gloss varnish. You should be doing this every time as a prep for water slide decals. Just because I have gotten away with not doing it doesn't mean you shouldn't, because the fixing chemicals may interact in funny ways with bare paint products as opposed to relatively stable hard gloss coats. I get my tools required for the job as well as my decal fixatives. I use Micro Solvent and Micro Set, which I can personally vouch for, but Vallejo and test stores also have their own equivalents of these products. They aren't mega necessary when applying to flat surfaces. However, if you're trying to put transfers on curved ones like Space Marine shoulder pads and can't get them to smooth, it's because James ass tells people in their painting tutorials you only need water when that is blatant fabrication of information. I first extract my House Liao crest transfer sheet and doing some quick side-by-side comparison, I think the second smallest size is pretty much what's gonna fit on this surface. A problem I have with that is that it's a huge panel for a 6mm battle mech, and there's still like 3 bigger sizes here, and even though there's more of the smaller ones, I feel like I'm gonna use all of these up before I even use the second to largest one once. Maybe if I want to make some Capellan branded Space Marine pauldrons one day, who knows. Anyways, cutting these to shape was pretty simple. I took my X-Acto knife and made a rough Superman symbol shaper on the decal, now placing it in water. What I forgot was that these, unlike most Warhammer transfers you come across, are not pre-cut, meaning you have to determine the shape of the film when you cut it off the paper, even the invisible transparent film around the printed section, and I cut this one pretty wide, which will give me issues later. The instructions in the package state that you need to wait until it is loose but not completely detached within the water and floating away from the paper as to not fully break down the starch within the decal. This is so it maintains its shape, but I have never had such a problem with other decals and did not experience any sort of issue with these. I then dabble some microset fixative onto where I intend to place said decal, and then utilizing the silicone brush, place said sticker. When the light catches the edges, you can see it's substantially too wide for the space, which is where Microsol or Microsolvent comes in. This red bottle has a formula which basically softens and sort of melts the decal, which then sort of sets into place during its loss of surface tension. This allows it to wrap around structure on a model and is an essential step for putting decals on anything that is not a surface flatter than, say, my X. You want to sort of just dab some on, and here's a time lapse of it setting. You generally want to do a couple rounds of this to make it fully set. In the meantime, I cut out my Death Commando skull iconography while I am waiting. Of the issues I run into here is the very smallest ones, while printed in doubtlessly really good resolution, are still so small that you can tell it's a logo, but from anything that's not close up, good luck recognizing this as a skull. I then place the larger onto the corresponding side of the mech. Now if you look at the Death Commando's triangle, it's canted, so while it's wet and the fixative hasn't set, you can just rotate it by massaging it gently with your brush until it is where you need it to be. Oh, I canted it the wrong way. I'm I'm actually in post editing this right now. I just realized that it's can't fuck. I then place that second death's head onto the left leg and then a far more precisely cut house crest on the right leg. Once all my fiddling is done and the fixatives have set, which doesn't take very long, I once again coat the areas worked on with gloss varnish to protect these transfers because I do not want to ever redo them on this mech again. Rather than bringing it all the way back down with yet another matte clear coat yet, however, I opt to first utilize a trick which I have not really shown off on this channel before, a rather rudimentary means to get clean stripes without having to utilize tricky decals like these. This is miniature masking tape from the hobby department of my local Hobby Lobby, specifically designed to basically have the rigid tape edges to effectively mask anything under it from paint over, but not enough adhesive to tear off any products you have it covering already. I take a couple narrow strips and bridge them over the swung open hatches which normally cover the missile pods, exposing just the smallest stripe in the middle of each. I then use larger tape to cover the rest of the miniature from any overspray from my airbrush, and as I do this you really see how problematically not sticky this is. It's one downfall as a product being that it sticks about as good as you use a sticky note. But I come back with that dark yellow and find a use for it finally, spraying where the model is exposed, and after a couple thorough coats of it, when I peel this tape off, we get a number of clean caution yellow hazard stripes. Doing this a couple more times in the legs, you can see in clips where it sort of just starts peeling off on its own accord when being sprayed by the air pressure. It's not very sturdy stuff. Where I wasn't aggressive enough in application, it would eventually come off and cause me real problems to the point where I just honestly free-handed the last one. This process is obviously way too crude to work to create complicated shapes like any unit logo, but for stuff like this, if you're diligent, you can get good results. Just don't regard it as a replacer for decals. We're in the final stretches. I'm done fucking around. This is Vallejo model color dark red. I'm gonna use my detail brush to coat the missiles with it. Then I'm gonna use the scarlet just to barely dot those middles to give them some pop. I think that looks great, but there's also a double set of SRM6s on the bottom of the torso, so I make those dark yellow with a touch of flat yellow in the middle of those, and I think that this color combo just rocks so far. I do make mistakes, so I cover them up with basalt gray, and then finally we are one gloss coat and one matte coat away from being to the point where all we have to do is look at it. This is a good-ass mech. I have said it before, but it's possible to say again because that's how it works, that this is my best mech and maybe even miniature ever. I do think that in spite of this sort of time-consuming and contrived process of application, I don't think I'd have wanted to do this army without the detail of that really cool logo, and with no hope of freehanding this thing, I would never do it. Plain and simple, but enabled by these decals, I have probably one of the best lore-accurate Death Commandos units painted. This scheme looked so good that the next day I cranked out a second Marauder, that one from earlier that had been stripped, because I felt like this Stalker needed a friend. And an additional observation I had doing that is that you need to make sure that you cut the paper all the way through when removing them from their sheet. This one was stubborn, and when I tried to tear it free with tweezers, I actually ended up scuffing and defacing nearly the entire house layout crest, which in setting would probably get me put up against a wall and fucking shot. And if I had to give my final opinion on this product, I can break it down like this. Out of 5 stars, 1 accounts for purchasing experience, which with no combined shipping being default is removed. Because the seller was kind enough to grant combined shipping, I will throw them half a star back for being willing to work with customers. For shipping expediency, I will grant 1 star, as even from Europe, this did arrive in a fairly timely manner, only taking 17 days to reach me. For packaging, I give it a star. It's just an envelope with instructions in it, and the decals are protected with a sealed plastic pouch to keep away moisture. For performance, which I will award the full star for its usability, as it works exactly like a decal should and behaves like virtually every other decal I have, turning out as a great product. And finally, for overall value, I will award half a star. This is no doubt a premium product and by all means works as advertised and instructed. However, I just can't get over that price tag and that shipping for something I know costs pennies to print. While that equipment can be expensive, I know from experience looking into alternatives like Cricut cutters and printers that it's not as high as a lot of people believe. And I just can't shake the feeling that we're looking at an insane profit margin on the part of Defiance Industries that just shouldn't have to be as high as it is. Overall, if I counted right, that's 4 stars, which I would say is both both good, but more importantly, a fair assessment of this product. I am likely to buy more decals from them in the future, as nobody in the States, if at all, is doing what they're doing with providing so many pieces of lore-accurate paraphernalia. But until then, and until I have another product review or painting guide for you, I have been Sick Figs, and this is a pretty dope mech. And all I'm saying is that if I fucking spend like $60 on a video and you're not gonna just subscribe, like, what the fuck, man? What do I gotta do? You made it all the way through just to push to not push the button. Come on, like, come on.
Hey, no, stop. Just calm down. Don't do